Здравствуйте, добрий вечір. Мені, будь ласка, 2 бокали. Харачі. Харачі, так.
Excuse me. Mask, please.
Маск? У меня нет маски. На маску.
Okay.
Привет! Here we are, close to sunset in Odessa Mama. The sun is just setting, got some light there still out over the port. And in today's Tip Thursday with me, Connor Klein, this is going to be an omnibus edition because I'm getting so many questions about the travel situation here in Eastern Europe, in particular for Ukraine, but also for Russia, Belarus, and occasionally for the neighboring country Moldova. As you can see, it is pretty sweet here. And let's get into it. Поехали! So here we're about to have some of these ribs. This is originally a restaurant from Lviv in the west of Ukraine. Also why they spoke to us in Ukrainian in this particular restaurant in Odessa. On the way in, we were asked for our vaccination certs. And of course I have my antibody test, so that was fine. We took a look at it. And yeah, that's about as much as it gets. So this is probably the first restaurant since I've been back in Odessa has actually asked me for the cert. So it's maybe running at about a 10% rate of asking me for it. In any case, once you have one of those, you're not affected at all. But unfortunately, the people who haven't been vaccinated or chose not to be vaccinated and haven't actually caught COVID and got the antibodies, going to be a bit of a struggle. Anyways, Smechnovo, Angela, because this looks really tasty. Давай.
So let's start with Ukraine, which is, of course, well, not of course, but I know because people write to me and they contact me for consulting, is the most popular country in the region to visit, Ukraine. So what is the situation? Pretty much the same as it's been in terms of coming into the country. You need to have either the vax cert or a COVID test, basically. But if you don't have a vax cert, then you need to have the test done again within 72 hours of arrival in order to avoid having to do self-isolation. But normally, basically just do the test and you're fine. Also get the insurance, the very special insurance that you need for COVID. That has to be from a company with an office in Ukraine. Basically, it basically has to be a Ukrainian insurance company in reality. So you need to buy that online. Very simple to do. Costs more or less a nominal amount of money. And then you're good to go. So what happens when you come here? Because a lot of people have been put off because they've seen other reports that everything is in a lockdown. Well, that's not the case. Basically, a lot of parts of Ukraine are in what's called the red zone. So they have, in theory, some restrictions. And those restrictions would be if you don't have a vax cert or a COVID test. In particular, if you don't have the antibody tests, which is what I have. And actually, basically everything is open. It's just that you may be asked for, a cert when you get to the entrance. And that only really happens to be the case in Kiev, the capital. In the other cities where I have been in the red zone, which have been Dnipro, Mykolaiv, and Odessa. Here, I think in a week, I'd say it's only 3 or 4 times that I've actually been asked for a cert. So that would be an enforcement rate of probably about less than 5%, basically. So in reality, it's probably not going to affect you very much outside of Kiev. Even if you didn't have a cert, I would encourage you to definitely get the antibody test if you haven't had the vax cert. That would be my big tip for how to deal with that situation. Basically, what I've done as a strategy is whenever there's been a lockdown in the past, I've just moved city because they actually put the restrictions in by oblast, which is kind of the region. So there's always some region where it's not as high, and then there won't be those restrictions. And that was the case when I was in Kharkiv about a week ago. It was not in the red zone, and no one was asking anyone for any certs or anything like that. So that would be my kind of pro tip if you are in that situation, is just give yourself the flexibility to travel to a different part of Ukraine. Always good to be back in Dnipro with old friends. So let's see what a Thursday night has to bring.
It's called a red zone, just we're colorblind.
Exactly, no masks in Dnipro, no checking. This is what freedom is like in Ukraine. So
Drink so much. Nothing's going to affect you in your life.
Moving quickly along is to beautiful Belarus, the neighboring country here. And you know, Belarus, in terms of getting in, you need either a vaccination cert. There's kind of, I think it needs to be 30 days beforehand before you arrive, or you get the test done, the PCR antigen test done beforehand before you fly in. If you don't have a vaccination cert, then you do technically have to self-isolate for, I think the latest was 10 days. But in reality, people on the ground have been telling me that that's not enforced. So in reality, you'd probably be fine. But that's just the info that I have, the intel I have on the ground is not actually enforced. I have several consulting clients or guys who've been on my premium online programs that have been to Belarus to say the last month, and basically everything is open, not very different in terms of restrictions to Ukraine. In terms of everything is open, you can walk around. The bigger issue is actually getting out of the country, because you do need to do a COVID test to leave and fly out. And obviously there are very few flights in and out of the country from, well, there's nowhere from the west, right? You can't fly from Ukraine even, never mind the EU and the US at the moment. So the big important thing about Belarus, which is probably what I should have started this section about, is that they have changed the countries who are eligible for the visa-free. And in that updated list, Uncle Sam, the US, is not there anymore. If you are an American, the big change is that you're gonna have to get a visa. At the end of the video, stay tuned, because I'm gonna tell you exactly where I've been living this our experience with my clients over the last month. And there's a big change also that affects Belarus as well. So that's coming up at the end. Let's just go quickly into Russia and Moldova, and then I will give you some juicy insider tips on what you should be doing in terms of travel, and which country I think is the best to go to right now in terms of actually having a great time. So as I make a beeline to the port here, I'll let you know about Russia. So the situation in Russia is that you do need to do a COVID test regardless of whether you had a vaccination or not. So most of us who come from the West, we need a visa to go to Russia. Now there was an e-visa for EU citizens, but that has been suspended since the start of this whole COVID mess in March 2020. So actually everybody from the West more or less needs a visa. But I gotta say, I hate to spoil it for you. If you have your Russian visa and you're about to fly to Russia, well, if you're flying to St. Petersburg, Moscow, and watching some videos online from other YouTubers, and just reading from, one of my clients is about to go there, and everything's in lockdown. And I mean actually in lockdown, not just like you have to show a cert and stuff. It's actually closed. So that sucks. You can't sit down inside and stuff like that. So definitely a lot less attractive if you want to go enjoy the nightlife or have a normal life. And actually socialize and go out. Going to Moscow, St. Petersburg right now, obviously this is in November 2021, mid-November when I'm filming this, not the spot to go to. And then just briefly to mention that Moldova, the neighboring country, I'm sometimes still asked about it. I plan to go back to magical Moldova next year sometime. It's basically a pretty similar situation to here in Ukraine. Things are open, and as long as you have a vax cert or a COVID test, you can enter. So Chisinau, spoke to, actually my Romanian teacher is from Chisinau in Moldova, and she was able to tell me what's going on the ground there. So yeah, I think in terms of those four countries and the big cities, probably Moscow and St. Petersburg and Russia, least attractive to go to. That's a nice segue into where should you go and actually have a good time this winter in Eastern Europe. So whether it happens to be Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, or Moldova. With my clients recently, and also those who've already paid deposit are going to come in the next couple of months, we have been going to Kharkiv in the east of Ukraine, because I think Kharkiv's got good nightlife, it's a cool student city, got a great vibe there, and everything is more or less, well, it's open, everything, and there's not much scamming going on compared to Scammer Central, Odessa Mama, or Kiev, in fact, which also has a big issue with scamming, romance scams or restaurant scams, every type of scam going on, swimsuit scam, shopping scams. So definitely for me, it's been the most comfortable place to bring my clients to. Why not Odessa? Well, it's summer capital here, and now it's just about to start into winter, and it's actually going to get colder. About 4 or 5 days, it's going to drop another 5 degrees Celsius. So why am I not talking about Belarus? Well, that's because my consulting clients who've gone there in the last, say, 6 months, and in particular last 2 months have been very disappointed with the scene in Minsk. A lot of places have closed, unfortunately, in the last, we'll say 18 months. COVID first was an issue, and then obviously there were protests after the election in August 2020 and a subsequent crackdown. A lot of people, a same number of people left basically Belarus, especially a lot of young people. Actually now when I go to Kiev, I see a lot of the historical flags of Belarus are white, red and white in Kiev on buildings. So, and I never saw that before, even during the protests, I will say a year ago. So it seems like more and more Belarusians are moving here to Ukraine. Definitely in Kiev, I see a little bit of that. And as a result, my client said that the nightlife and the scene wasn't much fun in Belarus. It wasn't like the crazy heyday, the golden era, the golden epoch of partying in Minsk when I started the Czar experience back in late 2018, early 2019. It's very different now. And Russia, well, everything's locked down in Moscow and St. Petersburg, so I really can't tell you to go there. And then Chisinau, well, it's going to be pretty similar. It's going to be a small-term version Chisinau of, say, Odessa or, Dnipro. So it's going to suit a certain type of curious guy. I think you got the message. Czar experience will be lived primarily in Kiev and Kharkiv this winter. Down below is a link to the application form. If you are, it's one of a better word, delusional, and you think that there's like, you're 60, you're obese, and you don't have any success with women at all in your home country, and you think there are 22-year-old Instagram models waiting for you in the tarmac in Odessa airport because you spoke to them online, it's not going to be for you. We're living in the real world and on the Czar experience, right? I mean, you can potentially be with a 22-year-old Instagram model, but not if you're that kind of person, right? You need to have, some more value than that. On the other hand, you don't have any experience with women, you're too scared to talk to them, and you don't have any confidence in your real experience. Maybe you're 20 years of age or something like that. Not that every 20-year-old should be excluded automatically, but if you haven't worked on yourself and you can't talk to girls and don't have much confidence, then it's not really going to be the time to invest in the Czar experience. Get some confidence training, get some reference experiences, maybe come to Ukraine and experience it, and then apply for the Czar experience. And actually for both of those categories, if you are one of those people, I can help you anyways on the consulting calls, and I'll put a link down to that below. It's going to be a better option than actually living the Czar experience. I don't want you to waste your time applying for it and then waste my time. I'm being selfish. So actually don't waste my time because I got to read it and then just reply to and say that it's not a good fit for us. So consider the other options like consulting call, because it's where you can actually get me on the phone for half an hour, and we can run through and work out a good strategy for coming over to Eastern Europe. Anyways, I've rambled on, as I always do in these videos, but look at this. Yeah, it's been a very nice and very peaceful sunset here by the port in Odessa, Mama. Hardly anyone down here. So anyways, I'll see you very soon in the next video. Do pobачення, до свидания from Odessa, Mama, on the shores of the Black Sea on this beautiful mid-November's evening. Ciao, ciao.
Czar Experience.